Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Salem, Massachusetts. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you are watching from and the exact time at which you are listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing to which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. In the autumn of 1900, when the maple trees along Essex Street turned crimson and gold, the residents of Salem, Massachusetts, had long tried to distance themselves from the dark history that had plagued their town 2 centuries prior. The cobblestone streets and colonial architecture served as both tourist attraction and painful reminder of events best left forgotten. But for all their efforts to move forward, some families in Salem harbored secrets far more disturbing than the witch trials that had made the town infamous. Among these was the Thornifield family, whose elegant 3-story federal-style home stood at the corner of Chestnut and Summer Streets, its white columns and black shutters projecting an air of respectability that masked what transpired behind its walls. The family had amassed considerable wealth through the textile industry, and their name appeared frequently in local society columns, always associated with charitable donations and civic engagement. According to records from the Essex County Registry of Deeds, the property had been in the Thornifield family since 1823, passing from father to son for 4 generations. By 1900, the household consisted of Edgar Thornifield, the patriarch, his wife Margaret, their 3 adult children, William, age 32, Catherine, 28, and Robert, 25, and 2 household staff who lived on the premises, Mrs. Eleanor Sullivan, the housekeeper, and Thomas Ward, who served as both gardener and handyman. On December 12, 1900, William Thornifield was reported missing. The Salem Evening News published a brief notice on December 14th. The family of William Thornifield, son of prominent businessman Edgar Thornifield, seeks information regarding his whereabouts. Mr. Thornifield was last seen leaving his family residence on Monday evening. What the newspaper did not mention was that William had allegedly left after a heated argument with his father, one that Mrs. Sullivan would later describe to police as more terrible than any prior disagreement between them, and there had been many. According to a statement given to investigators, William had stormed out into a brewing nor'easter, taking nothing with him but the clothes he wore and, as would later become significant, a small leather-bound book. For 3 days, search parties combed the area between Salem and Marblehead, where William was known to walk when troubled. The harsh winter weather complicated efforts, and on December 16th, the search was called off as another storm descended upon the Massachusetts coast. On January 3, 1901, a lobster fisherman named James McAllister discovered William's body along the rocky shore approximately 2 miles east of Salem Harbor. The official report from the medical examiner, Dr. Harold Winters, cited drowning as the cause of death, though he noted unusual bruising around the deceased's throat and wrists, possibly consistent with struggle or restraint. Dr. Spuff Winters also documented that the body showed signs of having been in the water for significantly less time than the 3 weeks since the gentleman's disappearance. These discrepancies raised questions among local law enforcement, but Edgar Thornifield's influence in the community meant that such matters were handled with discretion. The Essex County Courier, dated January 5, 1901, reported only that the body of William Thornifield, missing since December, has been recovered. The family requests privacy during this difficult time. A private funeral was held at Greenlawn Cemetery on January 7th. According to the church registry, only family members attended, except for Catherine, who was described in Mrs. Sullivan's personal journal as too overcome with grief to leave her bed. The journal, discovered in 1976 during renovations to the servants' quarters of the Thornifield house, contained several entries suggesting that Catherine had been especially close to William and had fallen into a deep melancholy following his disappearance. Miss Catherine refuses food again today, Mrs. Sullivan wrote on January 10th. She speaks only to ask if anyone has found William's book. Mr. Thornifield has forbidden mention of any book in the house. This is the first documented reference to what would later become known as the Thornifield Diary, an object that would transform a family tragedy into something far more disturbing. The winter of 1901 passed in relative quiet for the Thornifield household. Edgar continued his business affairs, though associates noted he seemed withdrawn. Margaret was rarely seen outside the home, and according to Mrs. Sullivan's journal, spent most days sitting in William's former room. Robert, the youngest son, assumed more responsibilities in his father's textile company. Catherine remained in seclusion, emerging from her room only for Sunday services at the First Church of Salem. In April of that year, Dr. James Bartlett, the Thornifield family physician, began making weekly visits to the house. His medical ledger, preserved in the archives of the Essex Institute, contains cryptic references to Catherine's condition. Patient continues to exhibit signs of nervous exhaustion, sleep disturbed by vivid dreams she refuses to discuss, prescribed laudanum for evening use. By June, Catherine had begun to show improvement, at least in her willingness to engage with the household. Mrs. Sullivan noted that she had resumed taking breakfast with her parents and had expressed interest in tending to the rose garden, which had been her pastime before the unfortunate events of winter. It was while working in this garden on the afternoon of June 19th that Catherine made a discovery that would set in motion the strange events that followed. According to Thomas Ward's statement to police the following year, Catherine had been pruning roses near the stone wall separating the property from the adjacent lane when she unearthed a small package wrapped in oilcloth and twine. Miss Catherine came running to where I was turning soil for the vegetable plot, Ward recalled. She was white as a sheet, clutching something to her chest. She said not a word to me, but ran straight into the house. Mrs. Sullivan's journal entry for that evening states, "Commotion in the study this evening. Miss Catherine presented something to her father that caused him great distress. Raised voices, then the sound of something heavy falling. Mr. Thornifield emerged, looking ashen, locked the study door, and took the key with him. Miss Catherine confined to her room by Mrs. Thornifield. No explanation given to the staff." For the next week, a tense silence fell over the household. Edgar Thornifield was observed making several trips to his bank in downtown Salem and to his attorney's office. Margaret took to her bed with what Dr. Bartlett described as nervous exhaustion. Catherine remained in her room, meals delivered by Mrs. Sullivan, who reported that the young woman sat by her window staring toward the garden wall, neither speaking nor acknowledging my presence. On June 27th, Edgar Thornifield departed for Boston on business, expected to return the following evening. It was during this absence that Catherine somehow obtained access to the study, the key later found to have been copied by Thomas Ward at her request, though he would claim he believed it was with her father's permission. What transpired in the study that night remains unclear. What is known is that Robert Thornifield, returning home unexpectedly from a business dinner, heard unusual sounds coming from behind the study door shortly after midnight. In his only public statement about the events of that night, given to the Salem Evening News on July 2nd, Robert described finding his sister at their father's desk, surrounded by papers and in a state of great agitation. She was copying furiously from a small book, he told the reporter. When I entered, she looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before, not fear, but a terrible knowing. She said only, "Now you'll understand too," and tried to hand me several pages of her writing. Robert's account continues, "I refused to take them, concerned for her health and state of mind. I attempted to persuade her to return to her room, but she became increasingly distraught, insisting that everyone must know what he did. When I tried to take the book from her, she evaded me and fled the house. A search was immediately organized, but Catherine Thornifield was not found that night." Edgar, summoned home from Boston by telegram, arrived the following morning to discover both his daughter and what Robert described as William's diary missing. The next 48 hours saw an extensive search throughout Salem and surrounding communities. Edgar Thornifield offered a substantial reward for information leading to Catherine's safe return, though he specifically instructed that any papers or personal effects found with her were to be brought directly to him, unopened and unread. On the evening of June 30th, Catherine Thornifield appeared at the home of Reverend Michael Holloway, pastor of the First Church of Salem. According to the Reverend's written account, preserved in church records, she was drenched from the rain, physically exhausted, but speaking with unsettling clarity and purpose. Catherine requested sanctuary and insisted on speaking with both Reverend Holloway and his wife together. She produced from inside her sodden coat a small leather-bound book and several pages of handwritten notes. She told us the book had belonged to her brother William, Reverend Holloway wrote, and that it contained information of such a disturbing nature that he had been killed to prevent its disclosure. She claimed her father was responsible and that she feared she would meet the same fate. The Reverend, uncertain how to proceed but concerned for Catherine's evident distress, agreed to keep her presence secret while he consulted with church elders the following day. He secured the diary and Catherine's notes in his office safe. That night, according to Mrs. Holloway's subsequent statement to authorities, Catherine slept fitfully in their guest room, waking several times with terrible cries. In the morning, she was found sitting by the window, watching the street with vigilant eyes. She told me, Mrs. Holloway recalled, that there were actually two diaries, the one she had brought to us, which contained William's investigation, and another, much older one, which William had discovered hidden in the house. She said the older diary was the source of the terrible truth about her family. Before Reverend Holloway could meet with church officials, Edgar Thornifield arrived at the parsonage, accompanied by Dr. Bartlett and Police Chief Martin Walsh. How Edgar had discovered his daughter's whereabouts was never explained. What followed was described by Mrs. Holloway as a cordial but tense conversation in the parlor. Edgar expressed gratitude to the Holloways for sheltering Catherine during her episode, and explained that she had been suffering from delusions following her brother's tragic death. Dr. Bartlett confirmed that Catherine had been under his care for severe melancholia with accompanying paranoid ideation. When Catherine was brought down from the guest room, witnesses described a marked change in her demeanor. Where she had been agitated but coherent the previous evening, she now appeared sedated, responding to questions with single words or not at all. She did not resist when her father took her arm to lead her to the waiting carriage. Before departing, Edgar inquired whether Catherine had brought anything with her. Reverend Holloway, troubled by the situation, but unwilling to directly contradict the narrative presented by these respected community figures, stated that she had not. The diary and notes remained in his safe. 3 days later, on July 4th, as the residents of Salem celebrated Independence Day, the Thornifield house caught fire. The blaze, which began in the early morning hours when the household was asleep, spread rapidly through the east wing, where the family bedrooms were located. Edgar and Margaret Thornifield perished in the fire. Robert escaped with severe burns. Catherine's body was never recovered, though authorities presumed she died in the conflagration, as the remnants of her bedroom showed evidence that the fire had burned most intensely there. Thomas Ward, who lived in quarters above the carriage house, reported awaking to the sound of breaking glass. His statement to fire investigators indicated that he had seen unusual light, not like normal flames coming from Miss Catherine's window, shortly before the main blaze engulfed the house. Mrs. Sullivan, who had been visiting her sister in Danvers that night, returned to find the Thornifield home reduced to smoldering ruins. In her journal she wrote, "All gone. God forgive us all for what was permitted to continue in that house." The official report from the Salem Fire Department cited undetermined causes, possibly electrical fault, for the blaze. Chief Inspector George Merrill noted that the recently installed electrical wiring in the east wing appeared to have been tampered with in a manner suggesting deliberate action rather than accidental failure. However, with no clear evidence and no surviving witnesses except Robert, whose injuries prevented detailed questioning, the investigation was closed by the end of July. Robert Thornifield, after recovering from his injuries, sold the property and the family business and relocated to California. According to correspondence preserved by his former associates in Salem, he never returned to Massachusetts and refused to discuss the events surrounding his family's demise. The Thornifield property remained vacant for over a decade. The charred ruins eventually cleared, but no new construction attempted. Local children told stories of strange lights seen among the overgrown gardens at night, and the site gained a reputation as being cursed ground. This might have been the end of the story, a tragic family destroyed by fire, perhaps triggered by a daughter's mental breakdown, if not for the contents of Reverend Holloway's safe. The Reverend, troubled by his role in the events and unsure what to do with the materials Catherine had entrusted to him, eventually sealed them in a metal box with instructions that it should not be opened until after his death. When he passed away in 1932, the box came into the possession of the Essex Institute, where it remained in storage, catalogued but unexamined, for over 40 years. In 1974, during efforts to digitize and preserve the Institute's collection, archivist Daniel Cooper discovered the box and, finding no restrictions still in effect, opened it to find William Thornifield's diary and Catherine's handwritten notes, remarkably well preserved. What these documents revealed would cast the events of 1901 in an entirely new and disturbing light. William's diary began in October of 1900, approximately 2 months before his disappearance. The early entries described his discovery of an older, leather-bound journal hidden within a concealed compartment in the library wainscoting of the Thornifield home. "Found something today that has disturbed me greatly," he wrote on October 7th. "While searching for Father's copy of Emerson, I noticed a section of paneling that seemed ill-fitted. Curiosity led me to press upon it, revealing a small cavity containing a book. The journal appears to date from 1863 to 1865 and bears the initials G.T., presumably my grandfather, Gideon Thornifield. What I have read thus far has left me sleepless, though I dare not confront Father yet. I must verify certain facts before proceeding." Subsequent entries detailed William's clandestine investigation into the contents of his grandfather's journal. He described visiting municipal archives, church records, and even traveling to neighboring towns to interview elderly residents who might have known Gideon Thornifield. According to Catherine's accompanying notes, the older journal contained accounts of Gideon Thornifield's activities during and immediately after the Civil War. While serving as a military supplier, he had apparently discovered a method of securing government contracts through blackmail and bribery. More disturbing, however, were references to experiments Gideon had conducted on what he termed unclaimed individuals, presumably casualties of the war whose bodies had been diverted to his private laboratory instead of receiving proper burial. Grandfather writes of advancements in preservation techniques that allowed him to extract what he called vital essences, William noted on October 19th. He believed these substances, properly prepared and administered, could extend life and vitality. The process he describes is revolting. I cannot bring myself to transcribe it here. By early November, William's entries became increasingly agitated as he uncovered evidence suggesting that Gideon's experiments had not ended with the war. The pattern of disappearances in Salem between 1865 and 1879 correlates exactly with periods when grandfather recorded successful acquisitions, he wrote on November 12th. The victims were invariably travelers, immigrants, or residents of the poorest sections of town, those least likely to be extensively searched for. Most disturbing is Father's handwriting appearing in entries from 1875 onward. He was not merely aware of these atrocities, he was an apprentice to them. Catherine's notes included copies of newspaper clippings William had collected, documenting cases of missing persons during the periods in question. She had annotated these with dates from Gideon's journal, showing the correspondence William had observed. The most alarming discovery came in late November, when William found evidence that the experiments had continued into his own lifetime. "The cellar beneath the east wing," he wrote on November 27th. "I have passed by that locked door hundreds of times in my life, told it contained nothing but old furniture and family heirlooms too precious to dispose of, but too unfashionable for use. Today, while the household was at Thanksgiving service, I broke the lock. What I found confirms my worst suspicions. The chamber has been used recently, within the past year." The implements match grandfather's descriptions exactly, and in a journal on the workbench, in father's unmistakable hand, dated August of this year. Subject exhibited exceptional vitality. Extraction process yielded 67 vials, sufficient for approximately 14 months at current consumption rates. William's final entries revealed his plan to confront his father with evidence of these crimes. On December 10th, he wrote, "I can remain silent no longer. The burden of knowledge is too great. Tomorrow I shall speak with father privately. If he shows genuine remorse and willingness to end these monstrous practices, I will consider our family obligation to the victims and determine how justice might best be served. If not, I have prepared copies of my findings for delivery to authorities." On December 11th, the night before his disappearance, William made his last entry. "Overheard father and Robert in the study. They know I have been investigating. They mentioned Catherine specifically, concerns that I may have confided in her. I must protect her. Will conceal this diary in the garden wall before confronting father tomorrow. Should anything happen to me, may whoever finds this pursue the truth." The locked chamber holds all the evidence needed. Catherine's notes revealed that after discovering the diary in June, she had investigated the cellar chamber herself, finding it empty, but bearing signs of recent clearing, scorched patches on the stone floor, and walls freshly whitewashed. She believed her father had removed all evidence following William's disappearance. Most disturbing were her detailed drawings of a hidden cabinet she discovered behind a false wall in the chamber. The cabinet contained dozens of small vials filled with an amber liquid, each meticulously labeled with dates spanning from 1865 to November of 1900. Several vials were marked with the letter W and dated December 1900. "I now understand what happened to my brother," Catherine wrote. "Father has been continuing grandfather's work, extending his own life and that of select family members through these extractions." The diary suggests that grandfather lived to 107 years, though publicly his death was reported decades earlier. I believe the amber substance is what Dr. Bartlett administers to father and mother as their special tonics. I have observed their unnatural vitality despite their advanced age. Reverend Holloway had enclosed a sealed letter with these documents, addressed to those who seek the truth about the Thornifield family. In it, he confessed his failure to act on Catherine's revelations. "Fear for my position and the church's standing in the community overcame my duty to justice," he wrote. "When Catherine was taken from my home, I knew in my heart she was in danger, yet I did nothing. After the fire, I could not bring myself to come forward with what I knew, telling myself there was no longer anyone to save or condemn. May God forgive my cowardice." The discovery of these documents in 1974 prompted a quiet investigation by local historian Margaret Winters, granddaughter of the medical examiner who had processed William Thornifield's body. Her research, published in the Journal of New England Studies in 1976, attempted to verify the claims in the diaries against historical records. Winters confirmed several key points. Unusual patterns of disappearances did correspond to dates mentioned in Gideon's journal. Medical records showed the Thornifield family exhibited exceptional longevity and resistance to illness, and property records revealed that the land where the Thornifield house stood had previously been used by a tannery known for its chemical processes and experimental preservation techniques. Most compelling was Winters's discovery of photographs taken during the 1901 fire investigation showing the remains of the cellar chamber. Though officials at the time had attributed the unusual features to standard storage for textile chemicals, Winters pointed out that the arrangement matched Catherine's drawings precisely, including the location of the hidden cabinet, which investigators had apparently missed. The Winters investigation also located Thomas Ward, the former Thornifield gardener living in a nursing home in Gloucester. Though elderly and suffering from dementia, Ward provided a statement that corroborated certain elements of Catherine's account. Miss Catherine knew what was in the east cellar, he told Winters. Said her father and grandfather had been taking people for years. Taking their life force, she called it. Said they put it in bottles. I helped her get into the study that night. Thought I was doing right. Then came the fire. When asked about Catherine's fate, Ward became agitated. She didn't burn. I saw her, after the fire started, in the garden, but she wasn't alone anymore. Ward died 3 days after this interview, his night nurse reporting that his last words were, "They found her." The Thornfields always find what belongs to them. Winters' investigation also revealed a curious postscript to the Thornifield story. In 1956, a man named Edward Thornfield, note the slightly different spelling, purchased land in western Massachusetts and established a private medical research facility specializing in cellular regeneration and longevity studies. Photographs from the facility's dedication ceremony show a man bearing a striking resemblance to Robert Thornifield. The Thornfield Institute operated for 15 years before closing abruptly following a fire in 1971 that destroyed its main laboratory. According to Winters, local newspapers reported that the Institute's director perished in the blaze, though no body was ever recovered. Winters' article attracted little attention when published, dismissed by mainstream historians as sensationalism. The documents themselves were placed in the Essex Institute's restricted collection, available only to qualified researchers with specific approval. In 1983, a series of break-ins occurred at the Essex Institute. Among the items stolen were the Thornifield diaries and all of Winters' research materials. The theft was never solved, though investigators noted the precision with which the perpetrators had targeted these specific items, ignoring more valuable historical artifacts. For nearly 2 decades, the Thornifield story faded from even local memory, preserved only in obscure academic footnotes and occasional references in guides to haunted Salem, marketed to tourists. Then, in May of 2001, exactly 100 years after the events described in William's diary, construction workers breaking ground for a new office building on the former Thornifield property made a grisly discovery. While excavating the foundation, they unearthed a sealed copper container approximately 6 feet below the surface in an area that would have been beneath the east wing of the original house. According to the official report filed with the Salem Police Department, the container held human remains, specifically bones that appeared to have been carefully cleaned and arranged. Forensic analysis determined they belonged to at least 3 individuals, including a woman approximately 30 years of age. More unsettling was a leather-bound journal found alongside the remains. Though damaged by time and moisture, portions remained legible, revealing handwritten entries dated between 1901 and 1983. The first entry, partially preserved, read, "Catherine understands now. She has joined us in the work. With her help, we shall begin again in a new place with new methods. The fire purified and released us from scrutiny." The final legible entry, dated March 1983, stated simply, "Retrieve the evidence. Family history secured. The last witness passes today. We continue." These discoveries prompted a brief investigation, but with no evidence connecting any living individuals to the remains, and all parties mentioned in the journal long deceased according to official records. The case was eventually classified as a historical curiosity and closed. The remains were cremated and interred at Greenlawn Cemetery in an unmarked plot. What authorities did not make public was the amber-filled vial found within the journal's binding, labeled with the name Margaret Winters, and dated April 12, 1976. the day after she submitted her article for publication. In 2003, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a researcher at Massachusetts General Hospital specializing in aging and cellular regeneration, published a paper describing her analysis of an unidentified biological compound submitted anonymously to her laboratory. The substance, amber in color, contained cellular material that exhibited unprecedented longevity markers and resistance to degradation. Dr. Chen noted that the sample's properties suggested potential applications for extending human life, though she emphasized that the complex molecular structure would require years, possibly decades, of research to synthesize. 3 months after this publication, Dr. Chen's laboratory suffered a catastrophic equipment failure that destroyed all samples and research materials. Dr. Chen herself took a sudden leave of absence and, according to colleagues, relocated to a private research facility in an undisclosed location. Attempts to contact her for follow-up studies were unsuccessful. In 2007, renovation work at the First Church of Salem uncovered a hidden compartment beneath the pulpit containing a sealed envelope addressed to those who will come after. Inside was a letter from Reverend Holloway, dated July 19, 1901, just 2 weeks after the Thornifield fire. "I write this in great fear," the letter began. "Last night I observed lights on the ruined Thornifield property. Upon closer investigation, I saw 3 figures moving among the debris of the east wing. Though their faces were obscured, I recognized Robert Thornifield by his distinctive gait, still affected by his injuries. The second figure appeared to be a man much older, yet moving with surprising agility. The third, to my horror, was unmistakably Catherine Thornifield, whom all believe perished in the fire. They were extracting something from beneath the ruins, working with methodical purpose. When Catherine turned in my direction, her eyes reflected the lantern light in a manner no living eyes should. I fled before they could detect my presence. I believe now that the evil William discovered continues, that it cannot be destroyed by conventional means. I leave this account as warning, though I pray it will never be needed." The church dismissed the letter as the product of a guilty conscience and overactive imagination. It was filed away in their historical archives with no further investigation. In 2017, a graduate student researching Salem's architectural history discovered municipal records indicating that a building permit had been issued in 1901 for a property in Danvers, just north of Salem. The application, filed 3 days after the Thornifield fire, was in the name of Eleanor Sullivan, the Thornifield housekeeper. The student noted this coincidence in her thesis, pointing out that the floor plan submitted with the application included an unusual basement design with reinforced walls and specialized ventilation. The property, located on a remote wooded lot, had changed hands numerous times over the decades, but retained its original structure. The student's attempts to gain access for a historical survey were consistently denied by the current owners, identified in tax records only as Thornfield Family Trust. Local residents reported rarely seeing the occupants, though occasionally observing deliveries being made to the property by unmarked vehicles. One neighbor mentioned that despite the apparent age of the house, it was maintained in pristine condition, as if it were frozen in time. In October of 2018, Dr. Moira Jenkins, a forensic anthropologist specializing in historical remains, was invited to examine bone fragments discovered during renovation work at the Danvers property. Her preliminary report, submitted to Essex County authorities, noted unusual characteristics in the samples. "The specimens exhibit evidence of a controlled extraction process," she wrote. "Microscopic channeling in the marrow cavities suggests systematic drainage of internal materials. More concerning are the signs that this occurred while tissues were still living, a procedure that would cause unimaginable suffering." Dr. Jenkins requested permission to conduct more thorough testing, but before authorization could be granted, the bone fragments were reported stolen from her laboratory. Security footage showed nothing, though Jenkins reported finding an unmarked envelope on her desk the following day. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Salem Evening News, dated December 13, 1900, announcing William Thornifield's disappearance. A handwritten note on the margin read, "Some questions are dangerous to pursue. You've been R.T. Hunt." Jenkins immediately requested police protection and submitted all her findings and notes to both local authorities and colleagues at 3 separate institutions. Days later, she was involved in a single-vehicle accident on Route 114 near Danvers. Though she survived, she suffered severe head trauma resulting in memory loss. Upon recovery, she abandoned her research and accepted a position at a university in Arizona. The bone fragment analysis and all related correspondence subsequently disappeared from Essex County records. When journalists attempted to follow up on the case in 2019, officials claimed no knowledge of any investigation involving the Danvers property or Dr. Jenkins's work. During this period, a pattern of similar incidents emerged involving researchers who had shown interest in the Thornifield case or related historical anomalies. Academic articles were withdrawn without explanation, research grants suddenly canceled, and in several instances, scholars abruptly changed fields or relocated without notice to colleagues. In January of 2020, author James Morgan began research for a book tentatively titled The Thornifield Legacy, Salem's Forgotten Horror. A respected investigative journalist with several successful true crime publications, Morgan had become interested in the case after discovering Margaret Winter's original article while researching an unrelated story about historical preservation in New England. Morgan's research notes, recovered after his disappearance in August of that year, documented his systematic approach to the mystery. He had located descendants of several individuals connected to the original events, including a great-granddaughter of Dr. Harold Winters, the medical examiner who had examined William Thornifield's body. This woman, Harriet Winters Cohen, provided Morgan with family papers that included her great-grandfather's private medical journals. In these, Dr. Winters had documented observations he felt unable to include in official reports due to their bizarre nature. The body recovered from Salem Harbor exhibits characteristics inconsistent with drowning as the sole cause of death, he wrote regarding William Thornifield. The tissue appears desiccated in a manner I have never before observed, as if vital fluids had been systematically extracted. More disturbing are the marks of surgical precision around major blood vessels and lymph nodes, suggesting a methodical procedure rather than accidental injury. Most peculiar is the state of cellular decomposition, which appears arrested despite the estimated time of death. I have preserved samples for further study, though I hesitate to share these findings given the Thornifield family's position in our community. Morgan also uncovered evidence that the Thornifield textile business had maintained connections to medical research facilities throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, ostensibly supplying specialized fabrics for hospital use. Financial records showed regular payments to a Swiss pharmaceutical company known for experimental drug research outside the regulations of American authorities. By July of 2020, Morgan had compiled substantial documentation suggesting that the Thornifield family, or those claiming that lineage, had continued to operate across generations, changing locations and methods, but pursuing the same fundamental goal, extending human life through means most would consider monstrous. Morgan's final research entry, dated August 3rd, noted, "Made contact with someone claiming to be a former employee of the Thornfield Institute. Meeting arranged for tomorrow at Salem Harbor. Says they have physical evidence, a vial of the amber substance, and documentation of current operations. Must take precautions. Have left copies of all materials with my attorney to be released if I do not return." Morgan never arrived at the scheduled meeting. His vehicle was found abandoned near Winter Island with no signs of struggle. A search of the area yielded nothing, except a small leather-bound notebook, identical to the one described as William Thornifield's diary, washed up on the shore 3 days later. The notebook contained blank pages except for a single line on the first page. The Thornifield family protects its own. Despite extensive investigation by local and state authorities, no trace of Morgan has ever been found. His research materials, supposedly secured with his attorney, were reported destroyed in an office fire the week after his disappearance. The attorney, having left for a vacation in Europe the day after Morgan vanished, died of a sudden heart attack before returning to the United States. In the years following Morgan's disappearance, interest in the Thornifield case has diminished significantly. Academic institutions that once housed relevant materials report that many documents have been removed to private collections or lost to archival consolidation. Digital records have been corrupted or deleted during system updates. Those who actively pursued the story have largely abandoned their efforts, citing lack of substantive evidence or more pressing research priorities. The property in Danvers was demolished in 2021, officially due to structural concerns. Before investigators responding to anonymous tips could examine the site, the entire area was excavated to a depth of 20 feet and filled with concrete, ostensibly in preparation for a new commercial development. That development never materialized, and the lot remains vacant, surrounded by chain-link fencing and no trespassing signs. In June of 2022, a geology student conducting soil samples in the wooded area behind the former Danvers property discovered an underground chamber accessible through a narrow tunnel. According to her initial report to local authorities, the chamber contained what appeared to be laboratory equipment, much of it decades old but meticulously maintained. Before police could investigate, a sinkhole reportedly collapsed the entrance, rendering the site inaccessible. The students' photographs and samples were confiscated as part of an EPA investigation into potential chemical contamination. No findings were ever made public, and the student transferred to a university in California shortly thereafter, declining all requests for interviews. That same month, 3 separate medical research facilities across Massachusetts reported break-ins targeting their specimen storage areas. In each case, security cameras malfunctioned during the incidents, and inventory checks could not definitively determine what, if anything, had been taken. One laboratory technician reported seeing an elderly man accompanied by a younger woman in the facility after hours, though other staff members insisted no such individuals had been granted access. In September of 2022, Dr. Nathan Cohen, a professor of biochemistry at Boston University, and cousin to Harriet Winters Cohen, published a paper analyzing the molecular structure of what he described as a previously unidentified biological compound with extraordinary regenerative properties. The paper was withdrawn within 48 hours of publication, with the journal citing methodological concerns. Dr. Cohen subsequently took an extended sabbatical, and his university office was cleaned out by unknown individuals claiming to represent him. Colleagues who attempted to contact him received only brief emails stating he was pursuing private research opportunities. In January of 2023, Salem police responded to reports of unusual activity at Greenlawn Cemetery. Night security personnel had observed 3 individuals near the unmarked plot where the remains from the Thornifield property had been interred. By the time officers arrived, the visitors had departed. Examination of the site revealed evidence of careful excavation, though cemetery records indicated no authorized exhumations had been scheduled. The following week, a package was delivered to the Salem Historical Society containing a leather-bound journal and a letter signed "A Friend of Truth." The journal appeared to be the original diary of William Thornifield, stolen from the Essex Institute in 1983. The accompanying letter stated, "This evidence has been kept safe until those who would suppress it no longer maintain their vigilance. The truth of the Thornifield family must be preserved, as its members have preserved themselves, unnaturally and at terrible cost to others. Initial examination of the diary confirmed its authenticity, and plans were made for a comprehensive study by experts in historical documents and forensic analysis. Before this could occur, however, a water pipe burst directly above the secure room where the diary was stored, saturating it beyond recovery despite preservation efforts. The letter, which had been separated from the diary for copying, survived. In addition to the statement quoted above, it contained a warning. Those who appear as Thornfields are not limited to that name. They have operated under many identities across generations, always seeking the same goal. Life extended beyond natural limits through the extraction of vitality from others. Their methods have evolved with science, becoming more refined but no less horrific. They walk among us, wearing faces that seem to age but do not die. In March of 2023, a retired nurse named Eleanor Winthrop approached the Boston Globe with what she claimed was evidence of ongoing Thornifield activities. According to the reporter who interviewed her, Winthrop had worked at a private medical facility outside Worcester between 2010 and 2020, where she observed treatments administered to wealthy clients that involved injections of an amber substance. These weren't ordinary patients, she told the reporter. Some claimed to be in their 70s or 80s, but looked decades younger. They arrived monthly for treatments that were administered only by the director himself in a restricted area of the facility. Once I accidentally entered this area and saw what appeared to be a medical extraction process being performed on an unconscious individual. When I reported this to management, I was immediately terminated and threatened with legal action if I spoke about what I'd seen. Winthrop provided employment records confirming her position at the facility, along with a vial she had secretly taken containing residue of the amber substance. Before the Globe could publish her story or test the vial's contents, Winthrop died in her sleep, apparently from natural causes, given her advanced age of 87. The reporter who interviewed her discovered that her apartment had been completely emptied the day after her death by individuals claiming to be family members, though municipal records indicated Winthrop had no living relatives. The vial was sent to an independent laboratory for analysis. Results showed only common pharmaceutical compounds with no unusual properties. When the reporter attempted to follow up with the laboratory, he was informed that the technician who had performed the analysis no longer worked there, and all records of the testing had been lost due to a computer system failure. In July of 2023, renovation work at Massachusetts General Hospital uncovered a sealed wall cavity containing medical files dating from 1956 to 1971. Among these was correspondence between hospital administrators and the Thornfield Institute regarding joint research initiatives and special patient protocols. Most significant was a memorandum describing the transfer of 6 unidentified patients from the hospital's terminal care ward to the Institute for Experimental Treatment authorization granted under special provision. Hospital officials initially announced plans for a full investigation into these historical practices, but within weeks the matter was quietly closed. When pressed by medical ethics advocates, the administration cited legal advice regarding historical liability and refused further comment. The files were reportedly transferred to the hospital's central archives, but subsequent requests to access them have been denied. In October of 2023, a doctoral student in genealogy at Harvard University published a thesis tracing the Thornifield family lineage from 1820 through the present day. Her research identified a pattern of falsified death records, identity changes, and reappearances of individuals across generations. The documentary evidence suggests that what appears to be multiple generations of Thornifields may in fact be the same individuals operating under slightly modified identities, she wrote. Physical resemblances across supposed generations exceed normal hereditary patterns, and in several cases, handwriting samples from ancestors and descendants are virtually identical. Most compelling was her discovery of photographs spanning from 1865 to 2020, showing individuals with remarkably similar features despite being identified as members of successive generations. Digital analysis of these images revealed consistencies in facial structure that, according to forensic experts consulted for the study, exceeded what would be expected even among close blood relatives. The thesis received minimal attention in academic circles and was criticized for speculative conclusions. The student accepted a research position in Edinburgh shortly after its publication and has declined to discuss her findings further. In December of 2023, an anonymous source contacted multiple news outlets with information regarding a private medical facility operating in western New Hampshire under the name Livingston Longevity Center. According to documents provided by the source, the center catered exclusively to wealthy clients seeking cellular rejuvenation therapy at costs exceeding $1 million per treatment cycle. Most disturbing were employee records indicating that the center maintained a separate facility designated as donor housing, where individuals described as medical research volunteers were kept in long-term residence. These volunteers were primarily undocumented immigrants and individuals from unstable living situations, recruited with promises of health care and compensation. 3 journalists from different publications attempted to investigate these claims. One found the location specified in the documents to contain only an abandoned hunting lodge with no signs of recent occupation. The second was detained by private security personnel who claimed he was trespassing on a nature preserve. The third disappeared for 72 hours before being found wandering along a rural highway, disoriented and with no memory of the preceding week. All 3 subsequently dropped their investigations, citing lack of substantive evidence. In February of 2024, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the researcher who had analyzed the amber substance in 2003 before her sudden departure from public view, reappeared as the author of a paper published in an obscure medical journal. The paper detailed a theoretical approach to cellular regeneration using compounds derived from human tissue through a proprietary extraction process. Though the paper never mentioned the Thornifield name, it contained references to historical precedents dating to the mid-19th century and acknowledged the pioneering work of GT and ET in establishing fundamental principles. The methodology described bore striking similarities to the processes outlined in William Thornifield's diary, though using modern technology to achieve the same results. Attempts to contact Dr. Chen through the journal were unsuccessful. The editorial office provided only a post office box in Salem as a forwarding address, which proved to belong to a corporate entity registered as Thornfield Biological Research, LLC. In April of 2024, a fire destroyed a storage facility in Peabody containing archives from the Salem Historical Society, including all remaining documentation related to the Thornifield family. The fire was attributed to faulty wiring. Digital backups of these materials maintained on the Society's servers were corrupted during a ransomware attack the same week. As these incidents have accumulated over the years, a clear pattern has emerged, one of systematic erasure of evidence related to the Thornifield case. Those who investigate too deeply find their research compromised, their careers redirected, or in some cases, themselves subject to unexplained accidents or disappearances. Yet fragments of the story persist, preserved through the efforts of individuals who recognize the importance of maintaining this historical record, however disturbing it may be. These scattered pieces gathered here represent what is known or what is believed about one of Salem's darkest legacies. Some researchers speculate that the Thornifield practices continue today, evolved and adapted to modern science, but unchanged in their fundamental nature. The extraction of life to extend life, a terrible symmetry spanning generations. Others suggest that what appears to be coordinated suppression of information may simply reflect the discomfort society feels when confronted with historical atrocities that defy easy categorization or resolution. In this view, the Thornifield story has become a modern myth, accumulating details and connections that create the illusion of ongoing conspiracy. What remains certain is that the Thornifield diary, whether authentic historical document or elaborate hoax, continues to exert influence over those who encounter its story. The diary itself may be lost, but the questions it raised persist. How far would humans go to extend their lives? What price would they be willing to pay or force others to pay for additional years of existence? And how would such people move through the world, carrying the knowledge of what they had done to secure their unnatural longevity? In May of 2025, a small notice appeared in the real estate section of the Salem Gazette, announcing that the vacant lot where the Thornifield house once stood had been purchased by a private buyer. The listing agent declined to identify the purchaser, but mentioned that the new owner planned to restore the property to its historical condition based on original architectural plans. Construction began in June, following excavation work that local observers noted seemed unusually extensive for a residential project. Workers reported finding numerous artifacts during the digging, though all were apparently removed from the site before historical preservation officials could evaluate them. As of September 2025, the framework of a three-story, federal-style house stands on the property, remarkably similar in appearance to the Thornifield home that burned more than a century ago. Construction crews work only at night, citing scheduling requirements, and the property is surrounded by privacy fencing that prevents close observation. Local records identify the owner as a corporation called Heritage Restoration Partners, with a business address matching that of the Thornfield Biological Research Facility in New Hampshire. Attempts to contact representatives of either entity have been unsuccessful. Residents living near the construction site report occasional sounds that seem inconsistent with normal building activity, mechanical humming from below ground level, and what some describe as the sound of glass containers being moved. Others mention seeing lights in the partially completed structure late at night, particularly in what will become the East Wing. Perhaps most unsettling are reports from several neighbors who claim to have observed a middle-aged man and elderly woman observing the construction from across the street on multiple occasions. When approached, these individuals reportedly explain that they are descendants of the original family returning to their ancestral home. One witness, wishing to remain anonymous, described an encounter with the woman. She spoke about the house as if she had lived in it herself, describing details of the interior that haven't even been built yet. When I mentioned that the original house had burned down in 1901, she smiled and said, "The Thornifield family has a way of returning. We always come back to what's ours." Something about her eyes made me deeply uncomfortable. They seemed too knowing, too old for her face. As this report is prepared, construction continues on the new Thornifield house. Whatever secrets it may eventually contain remain, for now, hidden behind the veil that has obscured this family's true nature for generations. Those who find themselves drawn to this story are cautioned to maintain a respectful distance. Historical truth deserves preservation, but as many have discovered, there are some questions that carry their own risks. The Thornifield diary may be lost to history, but its legacy continues to unfold in ways that those who encounter it could never anticipate. For those in Salem who pass by the property on Chestnut and Summer Streets, the reconstructed house will soon stand as a physical reminder of events long buried, a monument not to preservation, but to persistence, to the lengths some will go to extend their time in this world, regardless of the cost to others. And perhaps in the amber glow of lights from the East Wing windows on dark nights, observers might glimpse figures moving within, continuing work begun generations ago, work that, like those who perform it, refuses to die a natural death.